welcome to Reinventing School. This is going to be a very different episode because we are not focused on professional educators and their theories about education and what we ought to be doing. We're actually talking to people who are getting educated sort of every day. So this is an episode that is filled with teenagers, but there's a connection between all these teenagers. And with that, Dr. Mary Jo, I'm going to introduce you and have you tell us a bit about you and also what the connection is between everybody, and then we'll move on to the discussion.
Thank you, Howard. The connection is real simple. These are wonderful young people, and I live in a small town about 45 minutes and 4 cultures south of Pittsburgh, and the young people here are part of our teen programming. We have a teen center called the Common Ground Teen Center. We have a very strong peer education program where young people teach with us. So most of these young people are peer educators or on the way to get there. The teen center was closed on March 16th, and on March 17th, we started Zooming twice a day with teens, 3 and 7, every day. And then we developed virtual summer camps the 1st of June. We're still running 10 of those. The bottom line is these are great young people, and I'm excited to have their voices be heard. So you're not going to hear from me anymore. It's all about them.
Well, we may occasionally come back to you for a question, but thank you. And thank you for doing all of this and pulling everybody together. I know it's not an easy thing to do.
My pleasure.
So let me spin a scenario, and then along the way, we'll meet everybody. So here's the scenario. Step 1, it is the summer of 2020. We are in the middle of a pandemic. The schools are planning to open across the country, and all the school boards, the school districts, all the administrators agreed that was a good idea. And then people started getting sick. So 2 weeks later, every school in the United States closed. So we're going to do distance learning. And that was a good idea for about a month or two. And then after that, people realized this is really crazy. I can't be a second grader sitting in front of a computer for 6 hours a day. I'm losing my mind. And teachers and parents are like, this is just not working. So we stop. No school. We're just going to figure something else out. We need a really good plan B. The school districts and the teachers and all, they all really struggle, but they don't come up with a plan. And there is no vaccine, but finally there is a vaccine, but it's only available to frontline workers. Nobody else. They just can't make enough of them fast enough. In the meantime, nobody's going into the school buildings. Trees are starting to grow into classrooms. It's just a nightmare. And this goes on for 2 years. Now, the problem is nobody has actually spoken to the kids and asked them, so what do you want? What do you want school to be? We've tried everything. It hasn't worked. It's up to you guys. Now, the good news about this scenario is it actually ends with a time travel adventure where we actually come back to September 1st and everything you do becomes the new rules, okay? So we're just going to have some fun with this. But what I want to do is think about, what do you guys want from school? And I'd ask you not only to think about yourselves, because everybody here is a teenager, so you've been through quite a bit of school, but also think about a first grader and a second grader and a fifth grader and all that, and think through what they need. Nothing that we do with school now, nothing that defines school or classrooms or testing or anything exists anymore. It has been completely a non-starter. So we are just going to invent this from scratch, and you guys are in charge of the entire US plan, just to put a little bit of pressure on it, okay? You're the only people who can figure this out. So with that, we're gonna get started. And oh, there's one other thing that was weird that happened. You remember how everybody was like you couldn't get any toilet paper? So now you can't get any chalk, and they've lost the way to manufacture erasable markers. So every whiteboard in the world now is completely marked up. They don't know how to get rid of this stuff. So that's just a small problem that came along the way. All right. So with that, where do we start? It's the first day of not school, and please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself, as we go through this, but we're kind of out of ideas, and it's really up to you guys now.
I mean, obviously, hi. Oh wait, first, introduce yourself. I am Rowan. I'm like 15. Yeah, that's who I am. So distance learning is difficult for a lot of people, and people who can do online learning, a lot of them are already in it. They've already made that decision to go and seek that out themselves. But for the rest of us who are just in normal everyday school, I mean, my school's not very normal, but that's a whole other thing. My school does use a lot of online things. For everyone else, we don't really, that's not a decision that we made. And I lost my train of thought. Sorry, I got distracted by my own thoughts. So obviously, sorry, let me just restart what I was thinking about. I'm so sorry. Distance learning is, you know, the most logical option. Like, online learning is the most logical option in this scenario. You're like, oh, we'll just teach everyone online. But a lot of kids, that's not good for them, and some people don't have strong internet connections, and some people just can't learn things online, and that's something that really needs to be considered for a lot of people.
Okay.
I'm going to stop here so I don't
we'll
lose my train of thought anymore.
Thank you. We'll put that in the column of things that might not work. So let's talk about what we do want to do. What do you want to, you know, what do you think is important? Subjects, teachers, you could, or yeah, go ahead. Don't raise hands. Willow, just jump right in.
I'm Willow.
And tell us who you are. Yeah.
I'm a junior, and I feel like, because like my main like classes were art and band, and I can't really do band online, and you can't really do art online because that's like more hands-on. But I want those classes, and it's very difficult to do that online because like my teacher usually like forces my hand in the right way to hold the pencil or like the paintbrush. And I feel like if we did like a hybrid sort of deal where like only a certain amount of kids on, like, because I can learn math, reading, and those subjects, but how are you going to do workshop or art, band, video class? I don't remember the name. There's an acting class. Like, we can't do those.
Well, all right, but maybe we can. Let me take you a little further. So there is this robot, and there is machine learning, right? So it's looking at and I draw some, so it's looking at the way you're drawing. It's like, yeah, you know, you don't really want to be doing that because the drawing's just not going to work. So the robot kind of grabs your hand and goes, well, let's try it this way. So remember, anything is fair game. Don't think about where we are now. Think about a parallel universe where we can do whatever we want. Doesn't have to be a class either.
You got me stumped there.
Yeah, I know. Right?
I can't really think of anything at the moment. But like,
go ahead.
It's like more of like a person-on-person sort of deal where like a robot can't really express your emotions the right way. With a person teaching you, they can actually add on to what your idea is and like brainstorm, spitball ideas. So even if you did have that robot forcing your hand in the right way, you're probably not going to get the right action you want because you don't know how to interpret it correctly. And that's why we need the teacher.
All right, so let's take that as a start. We are reinventing from start. Do we want to have teachers? Are teachers a good idea? Forget about classrooms, just the idea of having an older person who has training, who somehow is helping you learn. Is that a good idea, or is that, yeah, that's very 20th century, we don't want to do that anymore?
I think absolutely. I think education is a very deeply personal thing, especially when it comes to students like me who are more focused on, I'm Sophia, by the way. I'm a rising senior, and I'm personally more focused on the humanities. I'm very into theater, and that is the school that I go to is a performing arts charter school, and I have special programming. Half of my day is devoted to theater classes. And that's we found over the course of this last semester that it was incredibly difficult to do any productive kind of work in that kind of realm of education over any kind of, without the personal connection that comes with it, because really art is about communication, and you can't really have one without the other. So especially even when it comes to more technical things, like when you get into academic more academic subjects that are just book learning, as it were. But it's still important to have somebody to kind of guide you in that direction, I feel, even if we completely throw out the usual model of distance learning, what we did this past semester, where we had teachers teaching, but just in a different format. Even if we throw that out entirely, I don't think we can afford to throw out the concept of a mentor or a teacher entirely. There's a reason the concept of a teacher has been around for all of human history.
Well, yeah, teachers' unions. No,
Yes.
I'm kidding. No, I mean, why would, I mean, to a certain extent, teachers want to protect their own jobs, right? And to a certain extent, obviously they want to work in a healthy environment, but let's combine. These are people who want to earn a living and also want to help kids, right? But let's say that we remember our scenario, remember the part where things didn't go that well? I forgot to mention the fact that the economy has completely crashed and we have no money to pay for it. Okay, so if we did that, how would you use theater as an example? Because theater is a great example. So suddenly there aren't teachers. Like, that's not going to be an option on your list coming back. Reinvent school for me.
I think the availability of resources to students is the most important thing. If we're going with a teacherless model, the most important thing would be that students have access to the resources they need to grow in their own way. If they aren't going to be guided to grow in a certain way by a teacher, then they need to have the resources available to be able to guide themselves. And that is a skill in and of itself that not everybody has. I mean, we saw that self-guided learning is not the most effective way to go. I mean, even in my personal experience. And so yeah, I mean, if we were to go with an entirely teacherless model, I think the most important thing would be to have resources available and for self-guidance to make sure that people were actually learning and bettering themselves.
Do we have schools? Do we have physical buildings? And do they have classrooms where 30 people hang out together? Is that a model we want to bring back? Because right now we're going to have to hack all those trees out of the classrooms and stuff and reclaim it from the animals. So
community is an important aspect, I think, of education, but it's not, physical presence with each other is not paramount in this situation, especially when safety and each other's health is on the line. Obviously, I think we should have some sense of community, especially if we're using theater as an example. Physical presence is very important because you can't really, personal experience, it's very hard to do theater with somebody over a virtual platform. It's about communication, and something in communication is definitely lost when you aren't in the physical room with that person.
Agreed. So tell me, somebody else jump in. Talk to me about the physical of this. Where do we want to have people gather to the extent that it's safe, right?
All right. I'm Christian. I've just graduated, and there has to be there's a very fine line between having the safety, but then also mental well-being for students. Because at least from personal experience, part of what made school bearable, and I'm someone who does enjoy learning and things like that, was the community and being able to talk with my friends and being with my friends during this. Because even during whenever tests picked up and we had 5 projects due, it turned into a sense of camaraderie. Hey, we're all now dealing with this right now, and we can talk to each other. And while you might not be completely de-stressed from everything at that moment, it still very, very much helps. So I personally feel that there has to be some sense of people being together within school, Because that was one problem that I personally found whenever we did everything online, was that sense of community. It was just really not there. And so I think we need to find the line where we can have enough people there to cultivate that sense of community and camaraderie while still being safe.
Hang on, I'm just kidding. Really? Whoa, cool. Okay, I just got a call from the future, and it turns out that we do have the virus vaccine, so that's not a problem anymore. So let's eliminate a variable. Elizabeth, what are you thinking?
Okay.
My name is Elizabeth. I'm 13 years old, and I am thinking that since the vaccine was found, I think that they should give the vaccine in small proportions so they would be able to give it to everyone, even if they have to take several doses throughout the year.
Good. All right, so now some of the problems that Christian mentioned aren't problems anymore. It can be social. You can all be in the same space. Do you want to be in the same space? Do you all want to go to school again and do that routine? Yeah, Willow.
Like, if the vaccines were a thing, not everyone's going to be able to get them.
No, everybody
I
got them.
haven't-
That's what they said from the future. They told me we're fine.
Well, okay, so if it's fine, I feel like even with this rush of people back together, like, the virus can grow and, like, become immune to this vaccine. Like, what if that happens and then it gets really bad again? I feel like if we still, like, not keeping them like 5 people, but like we can have like 15 people in each class, because you said that the average is like around 30, we could have that, and then we still do hybrid. I feel like hybrid is a really good option, where they, like, you come in for like 2 days each week, and then you do the rest online, and then we can slowly start adding people into the mix, and then we will go back to normal school.
But do you want normal school to be the same as normal school is now? I mean,
Well,
the answer can be yes. Yes is fine. But if you had the opportunity to completely erase not only the blackboard, but the whole building, and say, let's just draw this again, maybe there's not a building. Maybe there's a castle. I don't know. Maybe there's a beach. Like, what could there be, and how would we even begin to think about that? And we're going to talk about that, so think about it. We're going to take a break, just quick, talk about we're going to take a look at some of the episodes that are coming up. We'll be back within a minute. So it's hard to think outside these boxes that have been created,
Absolutely.
these classrooms and schoolrooms and teachers and subjects and curriculum. But I'm asking you to jump past that and to really think hard about, if there were no grades, because there's no reason for grades, because you're learning everything you want to in your own individual way. If you could have robots, if you could have anybody in the community teach, doesn't necessarily have to be a teacher. If you could spend time in the woods, like, just how would you organize your life and the life of others in an environment where you really can change everything?
So I'm Patrick. I'm a computer enthusiast. I'm 18, graduated. A lot of times, one of the things I often ask is, when in the real world am I going to use this? That's something I hear a lot. And when I think of curriculums that are just diverse and broad, I wonder, like, how much knowledge is useful in the real world. So I would think, and idealistically, education is internships. So being in careers around, like, maybe different careers, or if you have in those careers specifically, that would be ways for you to learn more real world applicable skills and also have a mentor as a teacher figure while you're working or, doing whatever on the job. It's a way to be productive. It's a way to learn. And I personally believe that would be more productive than a traditional classroom.
Okay, so let's take that a step further. You live in a community. In that community, there are people who are doing things that you would be interested in doing. Fair assumption?
Yeah.
So no more school.
Mhm.
You get to hang out with anybody you're going to apprentice, basically. Old-fashioned, Middle Ages apprentice. You're going to learn how to do it because somebody else nearby knows and they have responsibility. How old are you when you start doing that? Are you 5?
I think the key to education is motivation.
Okay.
I hate setting very strict rules based off age. I don't think that's very applicable because I think that varies on who you're talking to. So I think there should be a part of that. I think it should be whenever someone feels motivated to go pursue their path.
Okay. Jay, you look like you're jumping in here.
Yeah. So
Tell us
hi,
about you. Yeah.
So hi, my name is Jay. I am 14 and I'm going into 9th grade next year. I like that kind of idea to like focus on what you want to do. But I also think there should be at least some time where everybody learns everything, because if you just like when I was 7 and I was like, oh, I automatically I want to be a fashion designer. I don't need math or science or stuff like this. But then as I grew, I learned that I didn't want to do that through other classes. Like I learned that I did like math and I did like science. So if we're not all learning the same thing up to a certain point, I don't feel that people could learn what they actually do want to do.
Cool. What do you think, and I'm just going to go around the horn here, do you think you have to learn? Name 3 things that you feel that everybody should learn. And then I'm going to ask you 3 things that you would want to learn if school could be customized for you. So Christian, start with you.
As far as 3 things that I think everyone has to learn, I would say basic English skills. We're assuming America, basic English skills in reading and writing, basic arithmetic, and then and this isn't something that I feel is taught in schools, but I think it's really, really important, which is problem solving and finding connections. Because that's something that I think is just needed within everything.
So Patrick.
I would probably say communication skills, being able to communicate with other people, morals and ethics. So communication with morals and ethics help make a more idealistic population in our perfect world that we're creating. And probably,
You can have 2, it's okay.
come up with a third one, can you come back to me?
Fair enough. Elizabeth.
The 3 main I would think I would need is math, because when people bake, you're gonna have to know a certain amount of measurements. Another one is English, because when you talk, you're gonna have to know instead of speaking gibberish all the time. My last one I think would be reading. So then you know how to read other people's words that they're writing for
Good. Willow. Oops, got on mute.
Yeah, I forgot about that. I feel like the ones that would benefit me, like the most
Well, what should
important
everybody
ones,
learn?
everyone. Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like everyone should learn like the basics, like math, reading, and English. I combine those 2 because you learn them in the same period. And then science, because how often are you gonna be quizzed on knowing your presidents or this? Like that's important still, but like you can look that up online and figure that out yourself. You can't really teach yourself how to, I don't know, figure out this equation. I mean, you could, but it will probably be harder than looking up how like politics or stuff like that. Stuff you learn in history class, you can find that out on your own.
Now remember,
Your own
there doesn't have to be history class. You can have anything you want because you are the ones who are inventing school. So would you really pick like science? Would that, I mean, like, it's okay if you want to, but if you could choose anything in the universe to learn about that everybody learned about, would those still be your choices?
I mean, yeah, because
Okay.
those are like the things that you need. Like,
Okay.
you're gonna, if you can't like write your words or figure out how to bake, because even though baking is measurements, it's also science because you have to know what temperature to put it at. You have to know, let me think, like, I can't think of anything. I usually can't. Like, what happens if you drop a light bulb and then all the gases go out? You will never know that unless you did it, if you knew science. So you could just be poisoned because you didn't know science. This is why you need science.
All right, JC? And tell us who you are. We haven't seen you yet, right?
Yeah, hi, my name is JC. I'm 16 and I'm a junior. And I think basically like the same thing that everyone else is saying. I think like just basic English and reading and math. I think you should have a pretty good understanding of those two, because then with English you need to know how to talk to people, you know, communicate with people. If you're not talking like properly to someone, they're not going to take you seriously. It's going to be difficult to like get a job, you know. And I think math too, because I think math kind of has to do with everything. So just have like a basic understanding of the way things work. I think you need math and reading.
Now I'm going in order on my screen, and the next person is Mary Jo. So I'm going to ask you the same question. What 3 topics do you think are necessary? You can choose anything in the universe, doesn't have to be a school topic. What do you think everybody needs to learn?
I've been sitting here thinking that I can't do that power that you put ideas in people's heads. I really want to have that. That's my superpower that I'd like to have. Because I'm sitting here thinking, come on, you guys. I wouldn't go with traditional stuff at all. I would have a class on becoming a good human that would involve morals and ethics and how your government works and what empathy is and how to find equity. I would have a series on the pursuit of happiness, if you will. Like what gives you joy and how do you figure out what gives you joy and how can you make a living out of what gives you joy? And I suppose people do need to read and have math and science, but I'd explore that differently. Like I'll give you an example. My mother was my first teacher and she was wonderful, but she didn't teach me like a teacher. We would drive past a donut shop and she'd say, we're going in. And I thought we were going to get a donut, but she went in the back and asked if they could show me how donuts were made. And she was a hands-on, let's go see kind of person. So if I could, my third choice would be to have young people be able to explore.
Okay.
Whatever it is they want to explore.
Good answer. Sophia.
Yes, so I think it's hard to pin down like standards of education for everybody, just because, and it's hard to kind of reform them entirely because the current standardized education system is based on the world that we live in, and like the systems are very intertwined with each other, so it's kind of hard to like start from scratch and not end up with something that looks pretty similar, just if we're keeping everything else. But I fully agree with Mary Jo. I believe that exploration and exploratory learning is something that really needs, I would include in my personal vision. I do think generally we need more, I would include basic morals, morals and ethics when it comes to interacting with the world around us. But I also think that some of the skills that we learn in school are useful. They're very useful for, even if you aren't going to like use them in your day-to-day life, I feel that you are a better as a person for knowing more about how the world that you live in works.
Okay, good.
So I feel I'd be remiss to not include even things that don't necessarily have like a real world application.
Fair enough. Rowan.
Well, like Sophia and Mary Jo were saying, I think like real world skills is important. So, you know, things that you're going to use. And every time someone says, well, you're not going to use that, knowing how to learn and knowing how you learn is incredibly important, because there are so many different types of learners. Everyone learns in a different way, and making everyone learn one way is not good. And I feel a lot of education is sort of falls in that direction sometimes, and that's not how it works for a lot of people. So yeah, I feel like, you know, a baseline, you know, math, science, history, that kind of stuff, English, knowing how to learn those things for you is important. And then, like, you know, knowing how to be a good person, like Mary Jo said, and knowing how to, like, you know, manage finances, because that's something that everyone has to worry about, at least in this society. Yeah, so
Okay.
I don't
That's
know.
good. That's
I feel
good.
learning how to learn is important, but you should all.
We are getting cut off, so let's go over to Jay. And Jay has to unmute.
Sorry. Okay, so I really, you kind of took the words out of my mouth. Mary Jo and Rowan and Sophia all said like very, very similar things to what I was going to say. But I also think that we can't really pin it down to only 3 things, because sure, I agree fully that math is super important and everyone should have basic understanding of like long division and multiplication. And I also feel that everyone should know how to like speak eloquently and know how to like talk right. And I think everyone should know a basic understanding of how the world works, like the soil and the rocks and what happened before us. I think that's very good. But I also don't think that like social studies isn't fully stupid and is nothing important if you're not going to become like a history teacher. Because sure, my 7th grade social studies class I learned about ancient Greece and ancient Rome and all these ancient civilizations and how those worked. But then in my 8th grade social studies class, I learned about politics, and I learned how government works, and it really was very helpful, and it was a really good insight to how the world works. So I was able to better understand. If I watched like a debate on TV, I was able to understand what they were talking about, and I could see what it meant for the real world. And even history, I think I'm going to sound like every history teacher out there, but I think to fully understand what could happen in the future, I think you should look back to the past and see what they have done, because everything is just an adaptation of what somebody else has done, just growing on it. So I think seeing how these ancient civilizations worked for thousands of years really could help us prosper and grow into what we could be.
Phew. All right. Well, I'm going to add mine, if that's okay, because you guys are getting me thinking. The very first thing I would go to is personal and public health. I want to know how my body works so that it can keep working. And I want to know how public health works because I don't want to make other people sick. So for me, that's the starting place. I want to know how my brain works, how my heart works, how my lungs work. And I want to keep learning that throughout my life. The second thing is I want to know where I fit into the world. I want to know about how to learn about my heritage. I want to understand the bits of me that come from different places in the world because parents or grandparents or whatever. But I want to be a global citizen. I feel like I want to understand how the earth works, how people, like how not to develop prejudices, how to get along with everybody, how to feel secure in who I am and where I am and what those places around me mean, whether they're trees or they're commerce or whatever. So that'd be number 2. And number 3, you stole from me, Rowan. So I thought, and then you said it much better than I could, but and somebody else did too. The idea of learning how to learn and explore, I think it just goes so far above English or science. But the other part that I would ask, that I would add is, and the ability to teach others. because that's how humans make progress. And if we don't know how to teach others, we stop. And you see that, in certain aspects of the political system now. It's like if we don't move forward, it's kind of a problem. And in this case, a lot of people have died because we haven't moved forward. So for me, those would be the three. But let's go around for personal now. And what I noticed is that a lot of us kind of hung on to some of what current schooling is and then went a bit further as well. This time, don't think in terms of what your school is capable of providing or was capable of providing. Think about what you want to learn and assume that the taxpayers will make that possible for you. Okay, so if you had
I feel
three
that,
things you'd like to learn, go ahead.
yes. Before I get into that, I feel like a lot of us are almost being set up for, not set up for failure with like just the structure of the question, but a lot of the current education system, like, obviously not in our hypothetical universe, but a lot of like what we have experience with is very it's one path. Like it's always been this, this is the only thing, and if that doesn't work for you, then that's something wrong with you. And not so obviously we're going to we kind of have these deep ingrained, like, this is what education is. And like, so obviously you have to learn math and you have to learn science. And like, so it's very difficult for us to even like kind of wrap our heads around a world in which that isn't a thing. Because even, if we were kids who maybe like struggled with those things and maybe thought that maybe this isn't the best for us. We weren't told that like, oh sure, let's talk about the system and like let's explore alternate options. No, we were told that was something wrong with us, and that was like it's something that we needed to fix about ourselves. So we're almost like indoctrinated into like this one kind of way of thinking about education, and we haven't really been allowed to be exposed to kind of alternate schools of thought with that.
I'm going to challenge you on that because I
Okay.
think because the word allowed was the part. So
Yeah.
I always allowed myself to go to a library and pick out whatever book I wanted. Nobody ever stopped me. I've always allowed myself, as long as there's been internet, to look at YouTube. And I've always allowed myself to engage in conversations about things I know absolutely nothing about, where I should be laughed out of the room for even being a part of the conversation. I'm fine with that. So
Right.
asking silly questions, entering domains that it's like, I don't know, we're just going to see how this works. So for me, school it's a tool. It's something that gives you some of what you need. But most of what you need, you got to figure out on your own. And you guys are doing that. I mean, it's like, so I don't feel like I'm lecturing to people who aren't doing that. You guys are all doing that. And look how you're spending your summer. So you've already jumped on I need to teach other people and I need to develop mastery and I want to try to question the things around me and all that. This is not new for you. And yet we're all adhering somewhat, right, to, well, but science, and I should know whether there's gas in a light bulb that might be dangerous, as Willow said, right? I mean, we all have those things like, yeah, but I might need to know that. And Mary Jo and I have been at this now long enough. It turns out that whatever you need to learn, you're going to learn. You don't necessarily need the structure to do it. I'm a little concerned because I have a cracked tooth now and a cracked filling and a little bit of decay. I'm making the decision not to learn that. I'm making the decision to outsource that. Somebody else will worry about that. He's called a dentist. I have a lot of confidence in him. I don't need to learn that. And I make a real distinction between things I need to know and things other people could know. Our air conditioning unit was making a lot of noise last night. My first reaction is not even to look at the air conditioning unit to figure out what's wrong. It's simply to get the phone and call the guy. Because it's not something that I'm going to be able to do. There are things I do really well. There's a lot of stuff I'm really terrible at. So does that mean I shouldn't learn anything at all about it? And how does that fit into a scheme of we can reinvent school completely? Willow, you look like you're going to jump in.
I actually live in a family where my dad actually reads the stuff and then he does it. So like I never really had the limitations that Sophia was talking about. Like if I really wanted to learn something, I taught myself how to draw like people and bodies. So like I feel it's just like it's just based on the person and then the family that you grew up in, because I learned that you need to go online, look at how to fix it, because everything's online now. So like if you want to fix your air conditioning unit, you can look up a YouTube video, you can search up a guide, and there's usually a guide that comes with your air conditioning unit. So I never really ran into those problems.
Do you think you will? I mean, so if that's true, what do you need school for? Just have YouTube.
Well, how am I going to search up the YouTube videos with English? How am I going to figure out what I need?
You'll say, send me a YouTube video about the air conditioner, and it'll put it up. What?
How am I going to be able to pronounce that if I never had English class?
Do you think humans require school to learn to speak? Because I know a lot of babies, and, you know, really?
I mean, to speak properly, you can like slur your words, and you need to learn how to pronunciate and put yourself off that way, because Siri doesn't really understand unless you go into detail on what you need. Because I use Siri all the time. I'm like, hey Siri, look up. Oh no, shut up Siri. You look up this thing. And like I have to do that, and it doesn't always work. You have to like type it in, you have to search it up, you have to read through a bunch of articles until you get your exact thing. And that's why we need the basics. And like in your magical world where everyone doesn't need the basics, and that you need like these special classes, like I agree, we do need those classes, and that's why we pick our electives in high school, but we also still need to learn the basics, I feel.
Cool. Okay. Somebody else. Jay, we can't hear you.
I would also like to butt in and say that if we don't ever have basics, like you're right, babies, they can talk. People under the age of 5 or whenever you go to preschool or kindergarten, they do know how to talk. But would we really want to be stuck on a kindergarten reading level if we never learn the basics? Because I'm sure our parents can do great. But if they never got the basics either, then how can they teach us? Like, I would never want to just be stuck on like a 4th grade reading level for the rest of my life. Or I would never want to know how to say these big words. Like a lot of my friends are like, no, I refuse to listen to school. I don't want to use big words. I want to use like bad and good instead of words that can better show my strengths and weaknesses as a person. I just think we need basics we need basics so that we can use how am I trying to say this? We need basics so that we can better understand the selective classes that we take for our desired course in life.
All right, let me ask you a question, everybody. Can you count to 10? Answers? Yes, right? Can you count to 10 in two languages?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? Can you count to 10 in 3 languages?
Yeah.
How about 4? No? All right, I'm seeing some heads going no. How about 5? Anybody? All right. So school's not set up so that you can learn a little bit of a lot of languages. School is set up so that you can learn a lot about one language, maybe some about a second language, right? Is that a good idea? It's a good example of what school does and doesn't do. How many languages do you think you should be able to speak?
I think it's important to be bilingual. I think it can help.
I see a 4. I see a 5. I heard a bilingual. 3. Okay. So how do you learn those? Do we want to have that as part of school? If there is such a thing as school, you want to have like 4 language classes? Do you want to take 12 years of that, or 3 years of that, or just a year of this and a year of that? Like, what's your thinking?
I think it's
just anybody jump in. Yeah.
Okay, I'll go. I feel like if you want, because I learned this last like week, is that people learn more languages when they're younger because it's like their brains are too hollow. No, I'm just joking. But they like, you need to like force it into their minds when they're young, and then they'll grow up speaking that language. Because now that I'm here and I know my one language very well, I struggle with learning other ones. But if I learned them all at once, I feel like I would have been more adapted and more knowledge. So I feel like if we just do like, I don't know, like 4 language classes, let's say we're doing 4. you do like one each quarter, because every 9 weeks, and then you'll go over it at the end of each quarter, and then you'll slowly develop which language. You have the basics of the language, but you also know what language you want to improve on and what you need to improve on, and then you can like go online and do Duolingo or other things like that.
So I've been one of the things I've been doing is I've been going around the world interviewing kids everywhere. So the idea of learning languages was like, this is cool. I should learn the language before I go, or at least learn a little bit, right? So on one trip, I went to Bulgaria. So they have Bulgarian. I went to Slovenia. They have Slovene or Slovenian. In Brazil, they speak Portuguese. And Paraguay, they mainly spoke Guarani, not Spanish, which is the native language that never got destroyed. But also the people who I met who were native weren't Guarani people. They were other people. So at a certain point, I'm like, I speak English. I feel badly for only speaking one language, but I can't possibly learn everything I want to learn. And by the way, so I'm not sure what school should I become fluent in Spanish, which I tried to do. I had 7 years of Spanish, and I remember a little bit. Elizabeth, jump in.
What I would do, so say like you want to, like I said, like I would want to learn like 3 languages. So you have your basic like English and like the 2 other languages you would want to learn. For me, I would go with your one language you would want to learn, study that until you get it down, and then on to the next language. So then as on, you'd be able to improve your skills in both languages.
Okay. Jay?
I think it is important to learn more than one language, because no, you can't learn all languages in the world. That'd be impossible. But there are some languages that are spoken many places, like English I know is spoken in a lot of countries, but also like French and Spanish. Think of the other 2 like main languages, and you don't have to learn all of the languages. But if you learn one that can be applied to many different countries, that could be very important. Also, a thing with a lot of like European languages, at least, is a lot of them share very, very similar things. Like Spanish and French, I know to contend in those 2 languages, they're very similar. They're very, very similar. But I think you should learn those in schools, because that's part that is very helpful. And at least for me, I had more motivation to learn it when it was in school than like Duolingo. Because like Duolingo, I was like, yeah, I'll do this. I'm going to be so great. I'll learn like 5 different languages. I ended up losing determination because I had nobody like pushing me on saying, you can do this. You should do this. Whereas like a teacher, usually my teachers at least, are very supportive, and they like know what works for children around whatever age you're learning. So I think also tying back to like, if we need teachers, I think that's very helpful when learning a skill like that.
JC, you've been quiet. What are you thinking?
I think it's important that you're at least able to learn like a little bit of a few languages that you think would be beneficial to you and like the people that you live around. Because I know some people that speak Spanish, and sometimes like people around here, they speak different languages, and I think it would be useful if you spoke a different language so you could help them maybe understand something that they don't understand,
So the reason I'm asking this, apart from the fact that it's an interesting discussion, is school is designed mostly so that most people learn most of the same things. But I find it really cool to talk to all of you, each of you, because you know things I don't know. So in a reinvention of school, maybe the idea is not to make sure most people know most of the same things, but instead most people know some of the same things, but mostly we all know different things. And language for me is a really good example of that. Because sure, I want to learn every language in the world. I can't even learn all the languages that are spoken within a mile of my home. It's not going to happen, not in this lifetime. And I can't imagine going to school and going from class to class, ignoring everything else so that I can get a smattering of a language that I may or may not learn. My experience with Duolingo was the same as yours. I was really excited about it. And then the motivation completely went away. And I was going to that country and using Duolingo to learn it, and it fell apart. Christian, what are you thinking? You've been quiet.
As learning different languages, like I can definitely see where it's extremely useful, but slowly but surely, it's a skill that's slowly being turned into that of a machine's job, right? Where while I definitely will have a harder time if I go to another country not fully understanding their language, with Google and and modern technology, that's nowhere near as big of a problem as it once used to be. And I think I'm definitely like not against learning a language in school, but the bigger thing that I have a problem with current school and which I think needs to change is that it's not so much something that they don't teach, it's what they get rid of. And I view that every child, whenever they're young, has the most curiosity in the world. I noticed by towards end of elementary to end of middle school, at least for me, I was a lot less curious of a person than I once was. And I think it's the way that it was once taught, and this is exactly how you do it. You do not question this.
What would you do instead?
I think what school needs to do is incite curiosity within children, and I think that it needs to be attempted to keep that flame going, and that wanting to learn.
Is curriculum the opposite of curiosity?
I feel so. Yeah,
Mary Jo, you have your hand up.
No, I just was agreeing with you with enthusiasm. I think it is. A quick anecdote: my oldest daughter in kindergarten drew a picture of a leprechaun, purple, and got an unsatisfactory on the picture. And when I saw this, I went into the teacher and I said, "I don't understand. She made the leprechaun purple. What was wrong with that?" She said, "Leprechauns are green." I said, "Leprechauns aren't real." So I think that creativity is often stifled. Yeah, and the other thing I want to say to all of you is I love you, but I got to tell you, your ideas about language even is very Western. There's a whole universe in Asia, and there's Hindi and Mandarin, Chinese, and Japanese. And this is conditioned what we do. I think what we do is we put ourselves in a bubble, and we're in a Western bubble. So when we think about other languages, we think Europe and South America and Mexico, but we don't think Thailand and Cambodia
or Congo, which is probably the most interesting place for language, because they tried when it was a Belgian colony to get everybody to speak French, but it didn't work. So they have hundreds of individual local languages, and they're having a lot of trouble modernizing apart from their corruption issues because so many people speak so many different languages. Can you think of another country where everybody spoke a lot of different languages at one point? I can. It's called the United States, but we decided not to, right? Instead, what we did was plow out anybody who didn't speak English. Let's talk about English for a second, and I'll explain why I think that the thinking we're all sharing is dangerous. You know what an invasive species is? An invasive weed, right? So it kind of takes over. I think English is an invasive species. I think that using the internet as its means for spread, to pick a word that we're using a lot these days, means that everybody, it's no longer a problem. As Christian said, we have a combination of technology and a lot of people are speaking English now, right? Great, but that means they're not speaking their native language. And gradually that native language withers and dies. And with it goes the culture. And that's what happened certainly in the United States with Native American cultures to an unbelievable degree, but also in Brazil, also in other places. So if you're reinventing, how do you think about that? Should we all learn one language or multiple languages? I don't have the answer. This isn't something where I'm going, no, you're wrong. It's like, I don't have any idea how you think about it, but it's all about your culture and your history and who you are as a person. And if you can't speak the same language your grandparents spoke, what does that mean?
The history of language is obviously like there are whole fields of study just about language and how it comes to be and what it means, and it has been definitely used in the past as a tool of colonialism and a tool of conquest to kind of stomp out what they see is like the enforce the dominant culture and get rid of everything else. And yes, there are wonderful things you can do with the English language, but there are also wonderful things you can do with literally every other language. And by translating, by putting the focus on translating and not kind of meaning is lost. Like you can't read, like I am currently, like I have had a couple years of Spanish, and like I can kind of carry myself along in a conversation, but yeah, if I tried to read, like, and even that's just like with my I have a sort of understanding of it. If I tried to read like a Spanish text of like a work of art, I wouldn't understand it as to the same level of a native speaker, and like it wouldn't mean the same thing to me at all. So I think it's so much meaning is lost if we try to keep our horizons so narrow. So I don't think it's necessary to maybe learn every language in the entire world that everybody speaks. But I think that the emphasis on how we view other cultures should be more on like understanding them where they are rather than adapting what they already have to what we have.
Willow, you and I both draw. When you draw, one of the toughest things is to decide what not to include in the picture, right? Like you can't possibly put. I'm sorry?
I include everything. If I want to add something, I just add it. It doesn't look good, just
okay. So
over.
I'm looking at you. You can see you too now, right, on the screen? So I can't draw every hair on your head. I can't draw every flower on your blouse. I have to make decisions about what I'm going to draw and what I'm not going to draw, because
I
I'm
feel
not
like you're
making a
just
photograph.
limiting yourself. Because if you really wanted to get an exact photo, you can go in, make a bigger like let's say it's like this big. You can go into detail with a pencil or a paintbrush, and you can draw every individual hair, because that's how I learned, and that's the pain that I endured. But now it's habit, and you want to draw every single hair. And with the lights and shadows, you need to draw every little, like you're stippling, and you know what stippling is because you said you were an artist.
Yeah.
You have to draw every single dot to get the shadows correct. So even though you say you can't do it, I feel like you're just limiting yourself, because I know that if you spent enough time on it, you would be able to do it.
Okay. Patrick, when you're you're involved with computer programming, yes?
Correct.
All right. You start out with this grand design of what you want the program to do. And then you have to make decisions along the way about what you're actually going to be able to do. Fair enough?
I mean, whenever I develop, usually I'd say there's definitely like a priority list of when I include things, but I usually end up trying to include everything that was in there.
Okay, all right. And Christian, I'm going to bounce over to you. So you've done game design, right?
Kind of, to a degree,
Okay.
yeah.
But you're familiar with game design, yes?
Yeah.
So one of the things that's interesting about game design is it is a simulation of something, right? You can't actually perform World War II on a bridge table. So you pick out the things that are most interesting, relevant, and all that, right?
Yeah.
So you can't do everything. You do some. So part of the challenge as a game designer is if you try to go too far, people will become so confused they'll have no idea what you're talking about. Is that fair, or am I looking at this wrong? Or do you think about this more like Willow does, where everything has to be included in the frame?
The thing within game design, most of mine comes from like Dungeons and Dragons, like tabletop games, is if you try to make everything as realistic as possible, you are going to create the most boring experience for your players you have ever made. What could have been an amazing thing, an amazing game, an amazing experience was suddenly stifled with so many details and just overhead and just overbearingness.
Okay. Now, I want you to go back. Have you ever played with a broadcast radio, an old-fashioned broadcast radio where you get a lot of static? You know what I'm talking about, right? So there are two engineering terms. that are relevant to that. One of them is sensitivity, and the other is selectivity. So the first thing you want to do is you want it to be sensitive enough to pick up that faraway station pretty clearly. But then you want selectivity. You want to be able to eliminate all the noise because you want to be able to hear that clearly, right? So you have to select it. And, okay. So I want you to think about that as we all kind of wrap up reinventing school. Do you want to have a tremendous amount of information as you do on the internet, and then you pick out the one little part that makes sense to you? Or do you want to be very selective? Somebody makes all the decisions and your options are few. And this decision will, of course, go to the master school board, and they will base the entire design of the future of school upon your decision. So are you tending more towards lots of stuff and you can choose whatever you want, or very little stuff and let somebody else make the decision? And then we'll all learn the same thing. So let me go the other way. So Jay, let me start with you. Tough question, huh?
Yeah,
And
you're
mute.
muted.
Can't hear you.
Sorry, I keep forgetting I'm muted.
Just leave
So,
it unmuted.
I don't think that somebody should make the decisions for you. I don't think that we should all be like, you have to take this math, you have to take the science, you have to take the social studies, and that's it. That's all your questions. But I do feel that there are, I think, an in-between. I don't think you should have full responsibility, because like if somebody has like full responsibility, you can take any classes you want. Somebody could take no math classes and then they'd forget all their math. Somebody could take just all art or just all theater, and they would forget all of the stuff that is important.
And that's okay or not okay if they forget?
I think it's, well, to what degree of forgetting?
Fair enough. Okay, that's fair. Let me jump on to Rowan.
Okay, so I mean, my whole opinion on this is kind of like, I want to, in a way, be told what to learn, but I also want to learn what I want, which doesn't make sense. I get it. But like, okay, so you have to take this many of, like, this, we have to take this many English classes. Well, what type of English classes can you take? Can you take an English class that's more interesting to you? Like, if I'm a scientist and I like writing, I like my research, I like doing my research, you're gonna have to know how to write those research papers. And being able to take classes where you learn mostly about writing research and getting your research into a way that people can understand, that still relates to English in a way.
Would you rather get an A? Would you rather get an A in something that you do really well, or a C in something that you didn't know much about, but now you know something about? Which is more valuable to you, the A or the C?
I mean, personally, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so an A. But,
okay, fair enough. Sophia, go ahead. Sophia.
Yeah, well, I mean, with the A, it's like it's a current paradigm. Like, I'm thinking about like college and stuff, and like, yeah, I'll take the A, because like, again, the system is built a very particular way. Anyway.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. Remind me of the question.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Would you rather have an environment to learn in,
right,
in which you get more choice, or somebody else makes the choices for you?
Yeah, I do feel like exploration is the most important thing, and the student should drive what kind of things that they learn, and everything is connected. It's like a very like holistic kind of view towards things, like the point that Rowan made about like, if you're a scientist, you're still going to need to learn, need to like, you know, communicate your research and stuff like that. Everything's connected, but that doesn't mean that you need like you need a very general thing. Like, you can, I think the student should be able to, there should be a wealth of information for you to be able to kind of take advantage of, and the student should be able to kind of choose the particular path that they want to take that will bring the most fulfillment to them.
Good. Mary Jo, you're not, because I can play around with time travel here. So, and you know that I have expertise. So, right, exactly. So I'm going to ask you to be the age that everybody else is and express your opinion that way.
I get to be 15 and
Yes, you
16
do.
and 17.
Yes,
I'm
you can
excited
pick,
about
you can be
that.
15 or 16 or 17, whatever you want.
They all sound lovely. From that perspective, and that's not easy to do, my friends, because I am here at 70, but if I remember myself at that age, and I do, I was a teen in the 60s, and there was a great upheaval socially. And I was hungry to learn how to make a better society. That sounds political, but it is what I was hungry to learn. So my focus in education, in nursing and teaching, what I chose to do as my path was all about making a better place for my grandkids to live in. And so if I would put myself back or be your age right now, I would still be thinking more globally. I really think that's a piece. Although I'm sitting here listening to you wonderful people and I'm kicking myself because when I had my 3 choices, I never said sexuality, and that's what I do.
Yeah.
So what the hell?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. My wife's roommate was a librarian. She's like, I'm never going to work in a library. So she's worked in a library for 15 years.
Right.
But, you know, library science as a major, why should I do that? And of course, it's sitting right in the room with her and she doesn't do it. JC, more other people are choosing for you, or you're making your decisions because there's a big field of opportunity?
I think it's important to be able to figure out what you want to do on your own, but I think it also helps to have like a little bit of like guidance along the way. But I think it's more effective in the long run if you can like navigate it more on your own, because if you're not interested in what you're learning, then it's not gonna, you know, stick in your brain as well as if you were learning something you were interested in. So
Fair enough. I actually wonder whether teaching is a meaningful verb or whether learning is the only meaningful verb. I'm not sure I can teach you anything. I think you can learn a lot. Willow. Well, we got to unmute you. Yep.
Can you say the question
Yeah.
again?
So given the opportunity, do you want other people to choose what you're learning, or do you want a broad range of stuff that you can learn on your own? And how does that affect the redesign of our schools?
I feel like when we're younger, like K through 6th grade, we should have a structure of what we want to learn. And then they tell us what to learn. But then whenever we get older and we can form better opinions about, like, we have a broader, like, mindset of, like, because whenever you're in kindergarten, what do you want to be? You want to be famous or like something like that. Like, you have just such a narrow idea. But whenever you're, like, in 6th grade, 7th, 8th, 9th, you have, like, more of an idea of, like, things that you can do. Because I didn't know what a graphic designer was when I was younger, so like I would want like guidance and like regular schooling for the first few years, and then whenever I'm older and I understand different things, I can branch off there. So I feel like it grows as you grow.
And that's similar to what we do normally. You're putting the line not after 12th grade, you're putting the line after 6th grade. Interesting. Christian.
It's kind of like this weird mix because what I kind of feel it should be is almost like this branching tree, where like probably around like K through 6, I can agree with Willow on this. It should be very much more structured and then getting through the basics. But then after that, it's kind of like, all right, do you enjoy math, science, English? Like where in that in general do you enjoy? And then it kind of branches. And then after that, it's more specific within that, and then it branches again. And then like you go through and your classes start to be more and more specialized as you like find what you enjoy, and you learn, and you're still more general, and then you get slightly more specialized over time, kind of like what we do, but again starting way earlier.
Cool. Patrick.
So I personally think it should be extremely generalized and not specified much at all. My love of computers came not at all from the school system. My love of computers came from, I found an interest. My interest was video games, and I continued to explore that. And eventually I wondered, these video games exist. How did they come into existence? And that's what led me into my interest of computers. And I learned pretty much everything I know off of the internet self-taught. This is just something that I did in my free time, and now I'm a career out of it. So basically everything from the strict structure of the school is just not very helpful for me personally, at least.
Do you think more people think that way? Or do you think if we went back to the 1940s, we'd find roughly the same number of people who are saying what you said? Without computers, but with something else, right?
Like they found a hobby and wanted
School's
to...
not for me, but I've been able to learn a lot by apprenticing, reading, practicing, doing, building, whatever. Do you think it's the same number of people, or do you think there's a trend here somewhere?
I would probably say it would be more difficult without the internet. I couldn't have done this without, I don't know if I could have done this without the internet and just a library. I don't really have enough of a perspective of a library to be able to tell you that in this day and age.
One of my college roommate didn't have the internet because we started before that, and is absolutely a major league computer wizard. He's the system architect for any number of huge companies. And he learned it on his own. You know how he did it? He used a computer. Elizabeth, right? Elizabeth, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking, like, why can't it be a combination of both? Like, you pick out, like, the subjects you want to do, and then if you have, like, some subjects, like some basic subjects that you want to do, you don't know. Do you understand that? Or
yeah.
Okay, yeah. And then they could pick it out for you. Or like that you want some people to pick out some certain subjects. Like say you want to do baking, but you don't know what type of baking you want to do. Like maybe desserts or like main meals. Like they could help you pick out that type of type of baking for you.
And I wonder if we used some sort of machine learning or other advanced technology, whether you could constantly have everything you're doing in your life plugged into that, but not for anybody else's benefit. It's your data, but for your own, to go, whoa, analyze that for me. Have I always been interested in video game design or baking or whatever? It's like, wow, I've been doing this since I'm 3. I had no idea, right? Like you start discovering patterns in your own life that you can't see because you're you. But somebody else looks at you and goes, yeah, I've been your friend for a long time. You've always been interested in that. It's like, I have? I didn't know that. So part of it is you actually need other people in the process, and part of it is you actually have to drive it yourself. So we have gone much longer than an hour, but you guys are so interesting, and this has been so much fun. Did anybody have anything that they wanted to say, but just didn't get the turn to say it? And that's always important. Yeah, Jake.
Just one final thing is that I do think it was towards the beginning of the more than an hour kind of thing is of if we need physical schools and teachers, and I didn't get to get my opinion because we went to a different thing, but I was just going to say that I think we should have still physical schools, or else people will lose interest in kind of like what happened with the Duolingo and like kind of what happened with language. People will lose interest and determination, and they will just slack off. And because like I know people during online school, I'm a very educational person, so I really tried because I'm paranoid about college, even though I'm 5 years away. But I know people that were just like, it's only 8th grade, who cares? And they just kind of like they didn't care after a while. So I think without physical schools and people telling them that they need to do it, people will lose everything and just forget. That was just a final opinion that I have.
Wow. Okay. That was as good a wrap up as I can imagine. Anybody else have anything else to add? Mary Jo?
I do have one thing. What if, and this is another whole discussion, my friend, but what if we change the definition of teacher? And instead of having a teacher, we have mentors who actually get to know their students. Maybe every mentor would have 15 young people, and they would have them. Finland does this. They call them teachers, but they have them for long periods of time, not just one grade. I think our model in America is not the best model. So we should look at other places globally. But I always believe young people have wisdom and knowledge inside of them, and my job is to help them find it. So I used to think kids were empty cups. I had to pour knowledge into them, but I've given up on that for at least 35 years. I think you have stuff. I mean, listen to you. You were beautiful. You have stuff. So a mentor helps you find it and helps you get your voice going.
Having interviewed kids all over the world, I got to tell you, Mary Jo, what you're saying is so true. The completeness that you guys bring, that this generation brings, and I don't think it's because of the internet. I think it's because you've given one another permission. There's just so much more to talk about, and I find it very easy to talk to you guys. And I found that to be true everywhere I've gone. And I've learned so much about specific stuff. It's like, wow, I never watched that show. It's like, you should watch that show. It's like, I'm like 9 times your age. What do you tell? It's like, you're right. Great British Baking Show is a really good show. It's just funny how we've all become so much more equal now. And with that, it's hard for me to understand how adults can prescribe what kids ought to know. I think that idea is beginning to drift away. And I think we're partners in it. And I don't think there's a leader and a follower. I think there's the student who wants to learn, and we have to do everything we can to make that possible. But everything that we talked about kind of points me towards that. And I can't figure out how to reinvent it, but there'll be a school board meeting tonight, a real one in our district, and I'm going to listen to them not reinvent, but instead to try to simulate the classroom experience by requiring second graders, I think, to sit for 6 hours a day watching Zoom. I'm hoping that's not true, but we will learn, as we always do. So thank you all very much I know you are all super busy, and I really appreciate you spending all this time with us. Your ideas are wonderful, and thanks for sharing. And
thank you, Howard.
Thank you so much for having us.
We also hang out for a few minutes afterwards, so don't run away. If anybody wants to keep talking just on our own, just for fun, we can do that. But in the meantime, we're going to roll the credits right now. Thank you all. For on-demand episodes and more, visit our website. Kids on Earth contains hundreds of video interviews with students from around the world. Learning Revolution is a global collaboration network for people who care about learning. Be sure to join us next Thursday for a new episode of Reinventing School. Thanks for watching.